Today I'm going to reveal a secret with salt that is surprising millions of adults around the world. Maybe at this moment you're asking yourself something very interesting. Is it really possible for a 70-year-old person to have firmer, more luminous skin with fewer wrinkles without resorting to lasers or extremely expensive creams? The answer is yes, it is possible. And it happens because there is a very simple and economical mask prepared with an ingredient that almost all of us have at home, capable of helping visibly improve the appearance of the skin. But here comes something important. Many people try to use this ingredient in the wrong way, and that is why they fail to see the results they expect. At the end, I will reveal to you the correct way of preparation, which is precisely what makes the difference between it working or not seeing any change. Well, now yes, let's begin. After the age of 50, the skin begins to transform. And most likely many of you have already noticed it because there comes a moment when moisturizing or applying a thicker cream simply is no longer enough. And this happens for a very clear reason. Inside the skin, several natural processes begin to slow down. For example, cellular renewal no longer occurs at the same speed. Collagen production decreases. Microcirculation loses efficiency. And the protective barrier of the skin becomes more fragile. Consequently, as time passes, the entire internal dynamics of the skin begins to change. And here comes something important that many people do not understand. This is not just an aesthetic matter. The skin is a living organ as active as any other organ in the body. Therefore, it inevitably responds to the passing of the years, but also to the lifestyle we lead. In fact, the skin is influenced by multiple factors: daily stress, sun exposure, diet, hormonal changes, and even the quality of sleep. That is why it is not uncommon for many adults to tell me in consultation, "Doctor, I feel that my skin no longer responds like before, even though I use good creams." And the truth is that this perception is completely correct because mature skin begins to react differently. It does not necessarily mean that it is damaged. Rather, it has entered a different metabolic rhythm, slower and more selective. Then the big question arises, if the skin changes, what should we do to help it? The answer is not in using more products or immediately resorting to aggressive treatments. What we really need is a gentle but intelligent intervention. That is something that respects the natural biology of the skin and helps it recover little by little some of the functions it performed easily when it was younger. And to achieve this, we must cover 3 fundamental needs. If one of them is missing, the results simply do not appear. First, release. The skin needs to free itself from the dead cells that accumulate on the surface, from the residues that clog the pores, and from something that almost nobody mentions, silent microinflammation. It is an inflammation that is not always visible to the naked eye, but that accelerates skin aging over time. Second, stimulate. Once the skin is cleaner and clearer, we must stimulate its natural functions. This means activating microcirculation, improving hydration, favoring repair processes, and supporting the production of the skin's own nutrients. And here comes the third point, which is often overlooked. Third, nourish. It is not simply about applying any cosmetic. Mature skin needs substances that it can truly take advantage of. Ingredients that do not remain only on the surface, but that act as real food for the skin, helping to strengthen it from within. When this principle is understood, any treatment begins to make sense because it stops being a simple superficial solution and becomes a more complete care. In fact, one of the most frequent mistakes that I observe in the care of mature skin is that many people try to correct only the symptom, dryness, loss of firmness, or wrinkles, but the internal conditions that cause those changes are not addressed. And this is important to understand because it is exactly like trying to make a plant bloom without improving the quality of the soil or watering it properly. The plant does not have a flower problem, it has a condition problem. The same thing happens with mature skin. It does not only need more products, it needs better conditions to function properly. Before continuing, write the word skin in the comments if you are committed to giving your skin the care it deserves. Well, and precisely for that reason, we chose these 4 ingredients. They are not here by chance. Each one fulfills a specific function, and when they are combined correctly, they work together to help mature skin recover balance, hydration, and luminosity. Let's start with the first one, sea salt or pink salt. This ingredient fulfills a fundamental function because it helps us open the path so that the skin can renew itself. Why? Because by performing a gentle exfoliation, it removes that superficial layer of dead cells that often acts as an invisible barrier. And here, something appears that few people take into account. If that layer is not removed first, practically nothing manages to penetrate the skin well. Neither creams nor serums nor oils can be absorbed correctly. That is to say, the skin remains covered by a kind of shield that prevents treatments from doing their job. That is why salt fulfills that first step to release the surface of the skin. But it does not end there. In addition to exfoliating, salt provides minerals that mature skin needs, such as magnesium and calcium, which contribute to cellular balance and help the skin maintain a healthier appearance. And there is something else that almost nobody mentions. Salt also activates the microcirculation of the skin. This means that it stimulates blood flow in the area. And what happens when circulation improves? Something very positive happens. More oxygen arrives, more nutrients arrive, and the natural repair capacity of the skin is activated better. That is why many older people feel that their skin looks more luminous immediately after exfoliating it. It is not a cosmetic effect or a visual trick. It is simply the biology of the skin reacting when it begins to receive circulation and oxygen properly. Again, now let's move on to the second ingredient, raw honey. While salt helps to release and prepare the skin, honey is responsible for deeply hydrating it. And this is important to understand well because not all hydration works the same way. Many creams only moisten the surface of the skin, but mature skin needs something more than that. It needs to retain water inside its tissues, and this is where honey becomes so valuable. It has the natural ability to attract water and keep it inside the skin for several hours, helping the hydration last longer. In addition, honey has a soothing effect. It helps reduce irritations, balances the skin, and favors the tissue repair processes. Something very important when we talk about mature skin. But there is an additional property that makes it especially interesting. Honey has what are known as bioadhesive properties. In simple words, this means that it gently adheres to the skin and creates a small humid microenvironment ideal for cells to regenerate. And this is key because dry skin works exactly the opposite way. It cracks, loses elasticity, and as a consequence, wrinkles become more visible. When the skin maintains moisture, the structure becomes more flexible and resistant. Now, let's move on to the third ingredient, extra virgin olive oil. This ingredient provides something that mature skin urgently needs, healthy fats and vitamin E. These substances help reinforce the protective barrier of the skin, which over the years begins to weaken. And what happens when that barrier deteriorates? The skin begins to lose water constantly. It becomes rougher, thinner, and much more vulnerable to the appearance of wrinkles. That is why olive oil fulfills a restorative function. It helps restore that natural protective film that age gradually wears down. In fact, today's specialists consider that the integrity of the skin barrier is one of the most reliable indicators of skin aging. When this barrier remains intact, the skin usually looks firmer, denser, and much more resistant. And there is another important benefit. Olive oil is rich in antioxidants, which help protect collagen from oxidative damage. This type of damage is one of the main causes of the deep wrinkles that appear over time. Finally, we arrive at the fourth ingredient, plain unsweetened yogurt. This ingredient surprises many people because few know that it contains lactic acid. Lactic acid performs a very gentle chemical exfoliation. And here's something interesting happens. While salt physically exfoliates the surface of the skin, lactic acid works in a deeper and more delicate way. We could say that salt exfoliates on the outside and lactic acid exfoliates on the inside. That is why both ingredients complement each other so well. But yogurt provides more than exfoliation. It also contains probiotics, beneficial microorganisms that help balance the skin microbiome. This microbiome is a community of good bacteria that naturally live on our skin and perform protective functions. When that balance improves, redness decreases, irritations are reduced, and the skin usually looks more luminous and even. Before continuing, remember to stay until the end, because later I will explain exactly how to prepare and apply this mask correctly to take advantage of all its benefits. Now then, this is where the really interesting part begins. When you combine these ingredients, you are not really preparing just any mask. What you are creating is a tool that acts on three levels at the same time. On the one hand, it releases. On the other, it stimulates, and finally, it nourishes. And this is important because when those three processes happen together, the skin not only looks better, it begins to function better. It becomes more receptive, more active, and above all, more capable of regenerating itself. But before showing you how to mix these ingredients, I want to pause for a moment on something that many people overlook and that, however, makes a big difference in the results. I am referring to the most common mistakes that both women and older men usually make when using these ingredients at home. And believe me, these mistakes can cause a natural mask that should help to end up irritating the skin or giving very poor results. The first mistake is using salt aggressively, as if we wanted to sand the skin. Mature skin does not tolerate excessive friction. After the age of 55 or 60, the epidermis becomes thinner and the lipid layer is reduced. As a consequence, any exfoliation must be extremely gentle. Many people think that if they rub harder, they will obtain better results. However, exactly the opposite happens. Microleans are generated, inflammation increases, and the skin can become even drier and more sensitive. This is especially relevant because over the years, the skin loses part of its mechanical cushioning capacity. That is to say, the same friction that it previously tolerated without problems can now cause redness, flaking, or even small fissures. That is why, when we work with physical exfoliants such as salt, the objective is not to scrape the skin, but to gently stimulate it and prepare its surface in a controlled way. Before revealing error number 2, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you can continue learning how to rejuvenate your skin. Well, the second error is using industrial or pasteurized honey, believing that all honey is the same. Raw honey is in reality a living product full of enzymes, antioxidants, and bioactive compounds. When honey is pasteurized, that is when it is heated to make it more liquid and more commercial, a large part of those compounds are destroyed. As a consequence, a large part of the moisturizing and regenerating effect that we seek in mature skin is lost. That is why not just any honey works. Here it is worth clarifying something very important. Mature skin needs ingredients that have real biological activity. Raw honey provides moisturizing, soothing, antioxidant, and even antibacterial properties, which helps maintain the skin in a protective environment. When that biological activity is eliminated during pasteurization, what remains is basically thick sugar, and the effect on the skin becomes much smaller or even counterproductive. The third error, very frequent, is applying oils to the skin without having previously prepared the surface. This happens because many people believe that oil is synonymous with hydration, but in reality, it is not. So oil does not hydrate by itself. What it does is seal. That is to say, it creates a layer that retains the moisture that was already present in the skin. That is why, if oil is applied before exfoliating or without having hydrated beforehand, the only thing achieved is sealing dead cells and dirt, making the absorption of nutrients even more difficult. And this is a very common mistake. True hydration comes from water. Because the skin needs water to recover elasticity, oil comes afterward to prevent that water from evaporating. If it is used too early instead of helping, it can block the benefits. Another frequent mistake is using sweetened yogurt or flavored yogurt simply because it is the one they have in the refrigerator. The problem is that refined sugar and many additives can irritate the skin and generate a pro-inflammatory environment. In addition, in flavored or ultra-processed yogurts, the beneficial probiotics are usually much lower or even non-existent. That is why we need plain yogurt without sugar and with active cultures. And here another piece of information appears that many people do not know. Mature skin tends to become inflamed more easily due to something called basal inflammation, which is a low-grade inflammation associated with aging. If we place sugar and chemicals on skin that already has that tendency, we are not hydrating. We are feeding that silent inflammation that accelerates aging. Another mistake, perhaps less evident, is leaving the mask on for too long. Many people believe that if a mask works for 15 minutes, then it will work even better if they leave it on for an hour. But in mature skin, exactly the opposite happens. Excessive times can irritate, dehydrate, or sensitize the skin. The skin needs stimulation, yes, but not aggression. This happens because mature skin no longer regulates moisture with the same efficiency, nor repairs its barrier with the same speed. When we expose the skin to active ingredients for too long, we force a metabolism that is already slower by nature. That is why in mature skin, there is no concept of more is better. What does exist is enough, applied with respect for the biology of the skin. It is also quite common that some people apply these ingredients several days in a row, thinking that this way they will obtain faster results. But mature skin needs time to respond, renew itself, and rebuild its protective barrier. When it is stimulated too much, the opposite of what we seek occurs, skin fatigue. To understand it better, we can compare it with physical exercise. A muscle does not grow while it is being trained. It grows during rest. With the skin, something very similar happens. Stimulating without allowing recovery does not regenerate. It wears out. And finally, there is a mistake that almost nobody mentions, but that is fundamental. Not observing how your own skin reacts. Each skin is different. There are thinner skins, more reactive skins, drier skins, or skins more prone to inflammation. That is why it is important to remember something that an ingredient is natural does not automatically mean that it is harmless for all people. The most advisable thing is always to begin gradually and observe how the skin responds, because listening to those signals is many times the best guide to know what it really needs. Tell me in the comments how old you are and what your name is. I read all of you. And now, before entering the practical part, I want to stop for a moment on something that almost nobody explains, and that from my medical experience is absolutely key: the right moments of the day to apply it and how to integrate it into the routine of an older person. Because it is not only about knowing what ingredients to use, it also matters when and how to use them. And this is important to understand from the beginning, because many times people look for natural solutions, buy good ingredients, or follow well-formulated recipes, but they do not obtain the results they expected. The reason it is not necessarily in the ingredients. Many times it is in the context in which they are used. The idea is that this practice should not be complicated, should not be heavy, and should not interfere with daily life. On the contrary, it must be integrated naturally into the routine. This is especially relevant in older people. After the age of 60, daily routines are usually quite established: schedules for rest, meals, activities. That is why any new habit that one wants to incorporate must adapt to that reality, not impose itself on it. This is where many people make a mistake. They focus on the what and forget the when and the how. And in the human organism, biological rhythms are as important as the ingredients themselves. It is not enough to have a good formula. It must be used in favor of the physiology of the body. The skin, like other organs, has biological rhythms, and these rhythms are deeply connected with what we know as the circadian rhythm, which regulates many functions of the organism throughout the day. During the day, its main function is to defend itself. It is exposed to the weather, to solar radiation, to temperature changes, and to environmental pollution. In addition, during the day, the skin acts as an active barrier that tries to protect the organism from external aggressions. Wind, cold, heat, sunlight, and air pollutants constantly generate small challenges for the skin. But during the night, something completely different happens. When night arrives, the skin enters the repair phase. Blood flow increases, more structural proteins are produced, and cellular regeneration processes are activated. During these hours, the organism begins to repair tissues, reorganize fibers, and renew cells that have suffered wear during the day. That is why many skin regeneration processes intensify during nighttime rest. That is why treatments that seek to nourish, stimulate, or improve the texture of the skin usually work better at specific times. This difference between day and night is not a simple detail. It is related to the circadian system, to hormones such as cortisol, to cellular metabolism, and to skin microcirculation. Cortisol, for example, is a hormone that rises during the day to keep us active and alert. But as evening falls, its levels begin to decrease, and that allows the organism to enter a more repetitive state. During the day, the skin prioritizes the barrier function and protection against the environment. During the night, when the organism is no longer receiving so many external stimuli, it can redirect resources toward fiber repair, collagen synthesis, and lipid restoration. This means that the skin takes advantage of those hours to recover elasticity, reorganize collagen, and restore its internal balance. This is a principle very well known in dermatology, but few people apply it in everyday practice. Then the logical question arises: at what moment is it advisable to apply this mask? A very good option is in the late afternoon or evening between 18 hours and 21 hours. In that time range, the body already begins to slow down its activity. Cortisol starts to decrease and the skin stops being so exposed to the external environment. This is especially beneficial for older people who usually have a more fragile skin barrier and more sensitive to environmental changes at that moment of the day. In addition, many people have already finished their main activities, which allows them to dedicate a few minutes to personal care without hurry or stress. Another excellent opportunity is before going to sleep, as long as the skin is not irritated or too sensitive. But here it is important to remember something we mentioned before. It is not about leaving the mask on all night. The idea is to apply it, leave it on for the indicated time, remove it correctly, and then complement it with a simple moisturizing cream. In this way, we take full advantage of the nighttime repair phase. During the night, the skin absorbs certain nutrients better and responds more efficiently to regenerative stimuli. In addition, at those hours, older people are usually calmer and with fewer distractions, which makes it easier to maintain the routine. And this has a real impact on the results. In medicine, we see it frequently. The treatments that can be sustained over time are the ones that really work, not necessarily the most sophisticated ones or those that require more effort. Many times the most effective treatments are not the most complex ones, but the ones that people can maintain week after week without difficulty. Now then, there are also moments of the day when it is not advisable to use this mask. For example, it is not convenient to apply it before going out in the sun, especially if the person is going to walk, run errands, or spend time outdoors. The gentle exfoliation produced by the salt and the lactic acid in the yogurt can leave the skin more sensitive to UV radiation, and that is something we want to avoid. After an exfoliation, even if it is gentle, the skin remains temporarily more exposed. So the ideal thing is to allow it to recover in a calm environment. It is also not a good idea to apply it just before exercising. Body heat, sweating, and increased blood flow can irritate the skin that has just been stimulated and alter its natural balance. Sweat can also modify the pH of the skin, which could interfere with the balancing effect of the ingredients in the mask. Another quite common mistake is applying it in the morning in a hurry, while the person is getting dressed or preparing to go out. In the morning, the skin is in defensive mode, not in regenerative mode. And when something is done in a hurry, it is usually applied incorrectly, left on longer than indicated, or removed abruptly. In addition, the stress and the speed with which morning activities are carried out do not favor a careful application. For many older people who live alone or who have very structured routines, a good strategy is to associate the application of the mask with everyday activities that are already part of their day. For example, it can be done while watching the evening news, while listening to the radio or some program they enjoy after the evening shower, which in fact is an ideal moment because the skin is more receptive and there is more moisture on the surface, or even while calmly preparing things for the next day, always without stress or hurry. Some older patients even find it useful to do it as part of a small personal care ritual, something that not only benefits the skin, but also creates a moment of tranquility. It may seem like a minor detail, but in aging medicine, these strategies make a difference. When a habit